a Nobel Prize winner in enzyme chemistry. Since those days, when we knew that fluoride inhibited enzymes, which steer every chemical reaction in the body is steered by an enzyme. So you're asking for trouble if you put a known poison of enzymes into the body. What we also have learned since then, that fluoride interferes with G proteins, which send messages across membranes, and interferes with hydrogen bonding, which is at the heart of biological structure and function. So we're introducing a toxic substance into the body which has very, very significant biological properties and causes damage. The level used in fluoridation is not small. They like to say, oh, 1 part per million is so eeny, weeny, teeny, weeny, won't possibly hurt you. 1 part per million. They say, 1 part per million is 1 cent in $10,000. I remember they did similar things with dioxin. 1 part per trillion was like a 1-second vacation after working 33,000 years. And this was industry's trick to show that, 1 part per trillion is negligible, it wouldn't hurt you. But the whole notion of making fun of these units as if that was saying something intelligent is utterly ridiculous. Whether 1 part per million is large or small, significant or insignificant, depends upon the chemical. For example, 1 part per million is 100 times the safe drinking water standard for arsenic. So if you're talking about arsenic, that's 100 times too much. If you're talking about dioxin, that's 1,000,000 times too much. So we need to have some scale on which to make a judgment, and the best scale, I think, is the one that nature has provided, and that's the level of fluoride in mother's milk. And that can be as low as 0.004 parts per million. And that's what shocked me 14 years ago when I found that statistic, because I don't think that nature screws up. Certainly doesn't screw up as much as we do. And the notion that dentists know more about what the baby needs than Mother Nature is absolutely preposterous. So what this means right now is a bottle-fed baby in London is getting 250 times more fluoride than a breastfed baby. And that's not, in my view, a wise or intelligent thing to do. Now, I don't think that fluoridation should ever have started. And there have been several places where it clearly should have been stopped. And one of them was in 1999, when the Center of Disease Control, which is one of the big promoters of fluoridation, the big promoter of fluoridation worldwide, announced that they got the mechanism of fluoride's action benefit wrong. For 50 years, they thought that the baby needed to get fluoride before its teeth had erupted, so that the fluoride would have accumulated in the enamel, and so when the teeth emerged in the mouth, the enamel would be more resistant to the acid attack caused by the breakdown of sugar by bacteria. It causes acid, which attacks the enamel. And it is true that fluoride in the enamel makes it more resistant to acid attack. But then in 1999, they said, whoops, we were wrong. It turns out that not enough fluoride is incorporated in the enamel before the teeth have erupted to give you this protection. So all those pediatricians that were giving tablets to pregnant women and drops to babies before their teeth erupted, that was all useless, totally useless. And still we have pediatricians doing that, by the way. But the moment that they recognize that the major benefits are topical, that it works on the outside of the tooth, not from inside the body. This is what they said. The major benefits, the predominant benefits of topical, not systemic, works from the outside of the tooth, not from inside the body. That's when fluoridation should have stopped. Because clearly, if you want the topical benefits, you can get a tube of fluoridated toothpaste, brush it on your teeth, and spit it out. That solves the ethical problem, because it means you're not forcing fluoride on people that don't want it, number one. And it also solves the safety issue, because you're not swallowing the fluoride and exposing every toxic substance to this business. So fluoridation should have ended in 1999 when that admission was made. But of course it wasn't. Here are the two statements, by the way, from CDC. Its actions primarily are topical for both adults and children. That's 1999, and again in 2001, fluoride's predominant effect is post-eruptive, after the teeth have erupted, and topical. Somebody from the health department said on the radio that the value of drinking fluoridated water is it bathes the teeth. Well, next time you take a glass of water, see how many teeth are bathed with this water. When you drink a glass of water, you will find that the water hits your tongue, it bounces off the back of your front teeth, and it's straight down the gullet. And unless you swish like that, you do not bathe the teeth when you drink fluoridated water. Now, the chemicals used, this is another shock, and most dentists do not believe this, but it's absolutely true. The chemicals used are not pharmaceutical grade as used in dental products. And by the way, they couldn't be. They couldn't be, because over 99% of these chemicals are absolutely wasted. They're used to wash the car, they water the lawn, wash the dishes, flush the toilet. Less than 1% is actually drunk. And even less of that gets near the teeth. And you couldn't afford to waste 99% of pharmaceutical grade. But we can afford to waste the stuff that we use because it's hazardous waste. It's hazardous waste from the phosphate fertilizer industry. It comes from the wet scrubbers. And let me give you a little history on this. For about 100 years, surrounding phosphate fertilizer plants, you will have found the vegetation was damaged, the citrus groves in Florida were damaged, and the cattle grazing on this grass were crippled. And after 100 years, we're slow learners, they decided to put a spray of water on to capture these two toxic gases, hydrogen fluoride and silicon tetrafluoride. And the product that's produced, hexafluorosilicic acid, is not a man-made, it's not naturally occurring. They can't dump this into the sea by international law. They can't dump it locally because it's too concentrated. But one of the vagaries of hazardous waste regulations in the United States is if somebody purchases a hazardous waste from industry, it's no longer a hazardous waste, it's a product. And now it's a product that you can put it in the drinking water. It's incredible but true. And there was a funny example of this in Johnstown, New York. When they stopped fluoridating, they had a couple of barrels of this stuff left over. And they put out a memo, we've got to get rid of this within 2 months. Because then if we don't get rid of it, we're going to have to pay to get rid of it as hazardous waste. It reverts to hazardous waste. So they had to find another community that was using it to use it up. Now, in addition to the hexafluorosilicic acid, it contains a whole bunch of other junk toxic metals like arsenic, chromium, lead, and so on, even radioactive materials. The same rock in Florida that's mined for phosphate fertilizer is also mined for uranium. So there are traces amount of radioactive isotopes there as well. These are the main chemicals then that are used, hexafluorosilicic acid or its sodium salt, and these chemicals have never been subjected to rigorous toxicological testing. The only testing that's been done has been done with sodium fluoride, not these silicon fluorides. Now, another extraordinary thing. The Food and Drug Administration has never regulated fluoride as a drug for ingestion. Either as prescription tablets or in water fluoridation. And as a result, fluoride has never been subjected to randomized clinical trials, which are the gold standard when you're regulating drugs for both effectiveness and safety. Never been done. In 60 years, there's never been a randomized clinical trial to demonstrate the effectiveness of swallowing fluoride. But the FDA does regulate fluoridated toothpaste in the United States. And if you go to America, you get a tube of toothpaste, this is what you'll see on the back. First of all, drug facts. Secondly, don't swallow. Thirdly, only use a pea-sized amount. And that's a pea-sized amount. And then this is the warning required from the Food and Drug Administration in 1997. This is when it came in. Keep out of the reach of children under 6 years of age. If more than used for brushing, that's a pea-sized amount, is accidentally swallowed, get medical help or contact the Poison Control Center right away. Now, you're probably wondering then how much fluoride there is in a pea-sized amount of toothpaste at 1,000 parts per million. Well, it's 1/4 of a milligram. Now, we fluoridate at 1 milligram per litre, approximately. So 1/4 of a milligram is in 1/4 of a litre. 1 milligram per litre, 1/4 of a milligram in 1/4 of a litre. 1/4 of a litre is 250 millilitres, which is 1 glass of water we're talking about. Now, I was at college with John Cleese. I played soccer with John Cleese, so a lot of his craziness is rubbed off on me. So forgive me, my humour sometimes gets in the way of my being portrayed as a serious scientist. But the science is good. But I have some fun at times, and this is one of them. Could you imagine what you would have to do in your kitchen if you were required by the FDA to do exactly the same warning as on this tube of toothpaste? Over your tap, you would have "do not swallow." And you would say, keep away from children under 6 years of age. And if you should accidentally swallow more than a glass of water, contact the Poison Control Center immediately. Amazing. This is the big surprise for many people when you actually read the literature, and most people don't, including the people in the health department that tell you it's safe and effective. They're not reading the primary literature. What they are reading is dummy reviews and second-hand material that gets fed down to them from Health Canada and the CDC and elsewhere. But if they actually read the literature, they would be astounded that the proponents' literature, not the opponents, but the proponents' literature, demonstrates that fluoridation is not very effective at reducing tooth decay. Let's have a look at some of this. First of all, let's compare countries, tooth decay in countries. Most countries don't fluoridate their water. Only about 30 countries in the world at any amount have any cities fluoridated. And only 8 countries have more than 50% of their population drinking fluoridated water. Those are Australia, Colombia, Ireland, Israel, Malaysia, New Zealand, Singapore, and the United States. Canada is less than 40% and falling. So you'll notice that most of these countries are English-speaking, and that this practice is largely pushed by Anglo-American. It's an Anglo-American phenomenon. And so they had easy takes in Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, and elsewhere. Now, 98% of Western Europe now drinks non-fluoridated water. Some of these European countries started, like the Netherlands, like Switzerland, but stopped. And today, 98% don't fluoridate their water. Now, some fluoridate their salt. In Australia, Austria, France, Germany, and Switzerland. The majority neither fluoridate their water nor fluoridate their salt. You know, in Australia, their health agencies are even more arrogant than American and Canadian health agencies. And they just say the first thing off the top of their head. And when Australian citizens bring up the fact that most of Europe is not fluoridated, the answer that comes back is, oh, well, in Europe they don't have centralized water systems. Give me a break. They should visit Germany and Scandinavia and the Netherlands to see if they have centralized water systems. What a bunch of crap. This is coming off the top of their head and is a clear example of working backwards. For these people, it seems that it's now more important to protect this program than it is to protect the health of our people. And so they work backwards. So anything that threatens fluoridation, out comes this crap from their mouths. And there are many examples of it. And the other thing is, oh, they all fluoridate their salt. Well, only 4 of those countries fluoridate their salt. So the majority of European countries neither fluoridate their salt nor fluoridate their water. But guess what? Their tooth decay has been coming down as fast from the 60s to the present as the fluoridated countries. On this graph here, this is data from the World Health Organization that tracks tooth decay in 12-year-olds around the world. There's 4 countries which are fluoridated on that graph and 14 that are unfluoridated. Can you tell the difference? And if you go to the end, if you go to the figures at around 2000, you can see there's a great cluster. You cannot tell the difference in tooth decay in 12-year-olds whether that 12-year-old has grown up in a fluoridated country or a non-fluoridated